Am going live on Instagram. I'm going to be recording in 3 different places. Wow, here we are, everyone. So, live on YouTube, live on Instagram for the Gun University accounts, and we're recording for the Going Ballistic podcast. Let's see if I can keep all the comments and input and everything straight. I'll try my best. All right, so what we're doing here is we are talking about the P320 and the issues that it's been having, perceived, actual, otherwise. So, although the live folks probably don't want to go through all this, we're going to go through it anyway. We're going to go through all of the things that have happened so far because we need a little bit of a history. And I just realized that my phone here is at 10% and I can't plug it in because I'm using all the USBs for the audio recording. So, Instagram Live, you're going away soon. It'll be YouTube Live or listening to the Going Ballistic podcast if you want to hear the rest. All right, so the Sig P320. I put together an article a few days ago. It is a hot button issue in the industry right now, and it feels like everybody is piling in on it. And I discovered an issue with mine and went to go write the article and thought for a day or two at least of, do I make a video on this? Do I show the issues I've been having? Do I even get into it? The answer was ultimately absolutely I do, because people might be getting injured from this. It's not clear. They might be getting killed from this. It's also not clear. We had a report that an airman died. It was alleged that the firearm, the Sig P320, I think it was the M18 model, discharged what was in the holster and it wasn't touched, and he was killed from this. But then just today, news articles came out that said an airman was arrested and charged with manslaughter in this incident, which means maybe it wasn't just the pistol going off after all. Maybe it was somebody else. So who knows? So let me get through this timeline real quick so you guys can understand what's going on here. The Sig P320 is a striker-fired polymer pistol that is really unique and that it has a chassis system, meaning the guts, the frame that holds it all together, upon which the slide moves, upon which the barrel's held, the firing mechanism is contained, all that is this small metal chassis that can snap in and out of different plastic grip modules or housings, where in another polymer striker-fired pistol, like a Glock, for example, the entire plastic grip section is the frame. It is not, you can take the parts out, but the rails don't come out, things like that. And unless you're going to cut the grip, you're not changing grip sizes or things like that. Well, the 320 has this chassis system that is uniquely modular. It started as the 250. So the Sig 250 was this effective gun, but it was a double action only hammer fired gun. From the side profile, it'd be really hard to tell a Sig 250 and a Sig 320 apart. So my understanding is they took that 250 and they adapted it to be a striker-fired gun. So they changed the internals and made it a striker-fired gun. And in January 2014 is when Sig announced it at the 2014 SHOT Show. So announced in 2014, came from the 250. 1 year later, September 2015, the U.S. Army, joined by the Air Force and Marine Corps, requested proposals for the XM17 modular handgun system, or the MHS system, and they were searching for a new military sidearm service pistol. February 2016, so not quite a year later, was the deadline for submissions to the competition. And by August 2016, so about a year after they requested proposals, the Army had down-selected to 2 handguns as finalists. Down-selected is a phrase that the military contracting process uses to say, we've narrowed it down to these. So they've down-selected to 2 handguns as finalists, Glock's and Sig's submission. Glock had a variant of the Model 19, and Sig had a variant of the Model 320. Once that down-select happened, it started phase 2 of the competition, where the pistols were supposed to undergo destructive testing up to 35,000 rounds. Now that matters. The up to 35,000 rounds matters because the test was cut short. The Army cut the test short and selected Sig, to a lot of people's surprise. In researching for this article, I found a military document that shocked me. I wasn't the first one to find it. Other people have had it out there. Matter of fact, as I found it and started Googling the name of the document and seeing around, I realized that there was even a video James Reeves did like a week or two prior So I definitely wasn't the one breaking this, but it still didn't seem like it was out there very much because the people I talked to in the know about the MHS and things like that didn't really know this was out there. So on a government website, still, I have a link to it from the Gun University article from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the OSD. So OSD.mil. I didn't even know it was a website. The Army discovered issues with the SIG pistols in the test. Okay. There were three main issues that the Army identified with the SIG. They identified a drop safety issue. They identified two reliability issues, one with double ejections and one where the pistol did not meet the minimum requirement for stoppages, so for reliability. The document didn't have any information about the Glock pistols on there at all, and I'll go through that in just a second. So I'm going to skip that for a second, hold that off, the problems that the SIG had in the MHS testing, and we're going to finish the timeline, and I'll go back to that. So someone just made a comment, the soldier systems reported the airman was arrested in the manslaughter. Yes, we agree. But the rest of the comment I don't necessarily agree with. You said his P320 M18 didn't fire itself. Maybe. So we don't know what we don't know. At first, everyone assumed that was the P320 fired itself, and now that someone has reported for the manslaughter of the airman, that doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't fire itself. One, the person is innocent until proven guilty. There may be nothing there at all, and it may have actually fired itself completely. Two, the manslaughter may have involved knowing that pistol for some reason went off in the holster, so they made sure it was pointed at him and slammed the table or did something like that. Maybe. Um, Maybe something else was done after he was struck by a bullet. I don't know, and none of us know. Uh, all we know is it's been reported that someone was arrested for the manslaughter. So anyway, get back to the timeline here. January 2017, SIG was announced as the winner of the competition. It happened at SHOT Show. I remember the announcement came out. The SIG booth erupted with excitement, of course, and kind of surprised everyone. The words I had been hearing, the scuttlebutt, the unofficial stuff, was that the Glock was just running so ridiculously well that uh, they were just running it extra just to see how long it would go because it was so funny how great it was running. I have no idea if that's really true or not. That's the scuttlebutt I heard from some of the people from the inside. Could be completely false. We don't know. But either way, it surprised us when SIG came out. Glock filed a protest almost right away that the announcement was premature among some other issues. It was premature because the phase 2 of the test hadn't even been completed per the competition rules. And instead, they stopped it at 12,500 rounds. Remember before I said it was going to be 35,000? They stopped it at 12,500 rounds. And the contract, when it was going for a competition, the contracts for military things come out and say, we have these requirements. You must meet these bare minimum requirements as the threshold requirements. And then we have target requirements, which should be nice to haves. But you got bare minimums and nice to haves. Well, the contract required a service life for these pistols of 25,000 rounds. They stopped the test at half of that. So they don't even know if any pistol in the test had that service life of 25,000 rounds because they didn't even go that much, let alone the 35,000 rounds that they were supposed to do for the testing, which was suspicious. So in June of 2017, a few months later, the United States Government Accountability Office, the GAO, released the results of an investigation that they did based on the SIG's problems in the MHS. It wrote in the GAO, this is the federal government, as a result of the investigation. Again, I have every single thing I'm mentioning here is linked on the Gun University article. They wrote, quote, Sig Sauer's full-sized handgun had a higher stoppage rate than Glock's handgun, and there may have been other problems with the weapon's accuracy, end quote. It's not good. By the way, stoppage rate, the way they defined it in the testing, I'll get into after this timeline, is whenever the pistol didn't perform as designed or intended. So a lot of these, I think about half of these stoppages were the slide not locking to the rear, which could be user induced, but again, it was worse. August 2017, so a couple months later, Omaha Outdoors put together a really great article and video that broke some big news in the industry. So there had been some rumblings about people mentioning that if you dropped a SIG at a certain angle, it would fire on its own. That is a no-no. Guns should not do that, correct? Yes, correct. it shouldn't happen. So there had already been rumors of that happening. So Omaha Outdoors investigated this, and they did find that if the pistol is dropped at a certain angle, it ends up being a negative 30-degree angle. For those of you that can see on the screen, I have a 320 here that is dropping it on the back of the slide and the frame kind of at the same time, almost like a V shape if it dropped to the back of the slide. If it dropped at that angle, the mass of the trigger with its inertia was enough for it to fire itself. So some people would claim it's impossible, it can't fire without a trigger pull. Well, true. The dropping made the trigger pull. So it is true that it couldn't fire without a trigger pull. It's also true that dropping it made it fire because dropping it made the trigger be pulled because of the mass. So they did this video, blew up the internet. Again, they did a really great job putting it all together. And the big concern I had with this was the same thing the Army had discovered back in its testing. So the Army already knew about this. The Army already contacted SIG about this and said, hey, if you drop your gun at a certain angle, it fires. And SIG made a fix. So they did what's called an engineering change proposal, an ECP, where they actually changed the specs. They're like, oh, sorry, it's not just SIG. Anyone can do this. We've had to do these when I was at Remington. You can say, oh, shoot, our product doesn't meet the requirement anymore or something broke. Hey, can we maybe change the design of the plans and get a second try? It's not this contest where you all just put your products in and then cross your fingers and hope they make it. You are allowed mid-test to go, ooh, we need to improve that. Can we improve that, please? It's fair because anyone can do it, but that's what happens. So SIG already came up with a fix, and the fix was lighter parts, lighter trigger, lighter other components, different springs, so that there wasn't as much mass and inertia to have it fire. And sure enough, that fixed the problem. Well, my other concern is SIG, when it announced the pistol, I put a picture of this on the article as well. They had contemplated or proposed a trigger blade safety similar to a Glock because it's on their brochure right there. Bladed trigger style safety, like it was something that was going to come with it. That means they had conceived of that idea and chose not to do it. My problem with that is those blade safety style trigger safeties solve exactly this problem. They solve exactly the problem of the trigger going back on its own. And so by not using one, who knows? Did that make that worse? I think it did. But they fixed it for the Army. And what bothers me is I don't know exactly when it happened, but it happened soon enough that they kept making these for the civilian market. So that means they were making pistols that they knew would fire if they dropped at a certain angle and kept making them for the civilian market and not changing them, using the old parts for the civilian market. Well, when the Omaha Outdoors video came out, they kind of couldn't keep doing that anymore. And at that time, it was interesting. There was the SIG manual. I can't find a good picture of it, but I know I had it somewhere on my computer. Had a picture of the pistol being dropped with like a fire burst out of the muzzle and like a no smoking sign over it. It says "Do not drop." They even said something like "Don't carry loaded unless you're actively using it or shooting" or something. I couldn't believe it was actually in there. Anyway, one day later, after Omaha Outdoors did that, SIG announces a voluntary upgrade program. They were very careful to not call it a recall, and they had said there's nothing wrong with the 320 because it passes every industry drop test. Because it's true, every drop test the industry had of certain angles and height, the SIG passed. This negative 30-degree wasn't on one of the industry standards. So I get what they're saying. However, I also now know that the Army flat out told them, your gun's no good for our test. We're not going to take it because it goes off when you drop it. And SIG said, oh, let us fix it. Let us fix it. And then they fixed it, but then decided to shut up about it and never fix it for the civilian market. That's not cool. Well, the second Omaha Outdoors made it public, the very next day they said, okay, there's nothing wrong with it. However, if you want a new trigger, we'll do it for free. So there's nothing wrong with the old trigger, but if you'd like a new one, you can get a voluntary upgrade. And they did that. So that was August 2017. March 2018, next year, all military branches adopted the SIG as the MHS pistol. And then I just put in the article from 2018 to 2025. I can't possibly do them all. I think there's well over 100 instances of people, soldiers, law enforcement officers, federal agents, all over the place claiming that the 320 goes off. Some of these, when you watch the video and you dive into it, you can see it's not the pistol's fault. Matter of fact, maybe most of these, you can see, oh, some keys got into the holster and pulled the trigger, or this happened or that happened. So it's the gun did what it was supposed to do. The trigger got pulled and the gun went bang. However, in other ones, it seems an awful lot like the pistol went off in the holster or it went off when it wasn't supposed to. And there's just so many claims of these. It's really, really hard to ignore. And there's been numerous lawsuits about this. A Washington Post article, let's see, in 2023 has a claim that more than 100 people allege that a P320 pistol discharged when they didn't pull the trigger. Now, the Washington Post isn't exactly gun friendly, so that might be all BS. But the fact is, it's just a data point for stuff out there. There's also been many lawsuits against Sig, and Sig keeps talking about how they've never lost a lawsuit, and therefore it's a good pistol. Well, they've settled multiple lawsuits, and I have found court cases where judges or juries have actually found that the pistol fired without the trigger being pulled. So I don't know why they're saying that. Um, for example, one just recently, they were found liable and negligent by a federal jury that said the pistol went off on its own. So anyway, so now through all this time, we have a lot of police departments, a lot of agencies are starting to see the problems that or perceived problems or real problems with the P320. So they get rid of them. And the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission banned the pistol. And they released a report that was detailing what they call an uncommanded discharge. So there's the terms like AD or ND for accidental discharge or negligent discharge. I think they are all NDs because they're all negligent somehow, except for these UDs, uncommanded discharges, which means you didn't make the pistol go off. You know, except for all these cases, guns don't just go off like they do in the movies and they drop and fall and go bang. They don't do that. You know, a gun in the holster to me is so safe. I don't even worry about necessarily where it's pointed. Maybe I should admit that, but I do. It doesn't go off when it's not supposed to, but these seem like they're doing it. So we have like ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, other places, you know, ban and stop using this. And then shooting ranges all across the country start banning it. It turns into a big mess. So let's go up a little forward in time. April 2023, the Marine Corps investigated an issue and published a report about the incident involving an uncommanded discharge. And the Marine Corps, based on security camera footage, determined that the Marine did not mishandle his pistol and that it was on safe and secure in the holster when it's discharged. Now, I've heard people that were on Sig's side on this one saying, well, he was playing with it. He was playing quick draw or something like that. Well, the Marine Corps says, according to the footage, the security camera was looking right at him and he didn't. That's a big deal. So April 2023, the Marine Corps says, not me, not anyone else, Marine Corps says that gun was in the holster unsafe and it went off on its own. Problem. August 2024, after experiencing an uncommanded discharge, the Michigan State Police asks the FBI to evaluate the pistol. And the FBI went through and evaluated the pistol, and the FBI's report wasn't made public until a year later in July 2025 because of a FOIA request. Now, the FBI's report was damning, but it also wasn't conclusive. It went through and listed issues or problems with the design, but at the very end it said, well, we can't tell you though if it's completely safe or not, but these are some of the issues for it. So yeah. Dot Gun says, I have a hard time staying in live streams and the chat is ignored. I understand, man. I got too much going on here to talk through it, so I'll get to the live chat soon. If you can't stay, I'm glad you joined for a little bit. I'll get to the rest in a little bit. So March 2025, SIG launches a website, p320truth.com, and they do the social media campaign that was titled the P320. It ends today. And they came back with an aggressive stance that said, hey, the P320 cannot, under any circumstance, discharge without a trigger pull. And all the allegations against the P320 are nothing more than individuals seeking to profit or avoid personal responsibility. Okay. At least they believe in the product, right? That's a good thing. May 2025. So this is the pressure this year. Pressure is getting bigger. They come out with that statement. In May, they actually went to the state of New Hampshire and lobbied and asked for special treatment from the state to protect them from lawsuits. They literally asked for legal liability to protect them from lawsuits, and they got it. That's something I haven't even heard of, that a state could just say, okay, company, you are not going to be in trouble for lawsuits if you caused any problems to maybe me in Arizona. That's just weird legally how that works, but whatever. That's what happened. In July of 2025 now, this is when the airman was killed by a bullet fired by an alleged uncommanded discharge from a SIG M18 pistol. And right now, we now know that someone was arrested in connection with that. We don't know if that means the pistol did it or didn't do it, but it seems a little more likely that someone may have been involved here. And by now, there's so many training institutions, so many police departments. Heck, even the IDPA organization have now banned the 320 because of safety concerns. And then I have a link to the most recent federal jury determining that the P320 was, quote, designed defectively, end quote, in a lawsuit. Like August, Houston Police Department bans it. It's been a lot. All right, before I get into the issues found during the Army testing, let me get to the comments, so people don't feel ignored in the live chat. All right, the 12,500 round test was per pistol, which greatly exceeded the Army's testing of the Beretta, which was under rounds per platform. Great. I am happy that they exceeded the testing for the Beretta, but that has nothing to do, in my opinion, with the requirements. So if they were supposed to go to a certain requirement and they didn't, and they chose it early, they ended the test early and chose a pistol that had problems, that's my issue. Whether it was tested more than a gun 30 years prior, great, they tested it more, but I don't think that means that it was good. They ended the test early and picked the gun. He also adds, to clarify, the Beretta XM9 testing fired thousands fewer rounds than the Army did in the XM7. That's awesome. I'm glad they're firing more rounds. That is good. However, in that firing more rounds and the stats I'm about to give you, the SIG didn't even meet half of the bare minimum requirement for reliability. So I'm glad they shot more rounds, but regardless of how many rounds they shot, the guns did not work as well as they needed to work. Someone on Instagram said he's going to buy a 320 from one of the dudes who are trying to ditch it for pennies on the dollar. Happy to be one of the people that sells it to you. Matter of fact, the only reason I don't want to sell it is I don't think these things are safe. Instagram, my phone's at 1%. And again, I can't plug in my charger because it will die or it'll take out away the microphone. So Instagram, you're about to go. Thanks for joining, guys. You can hop on over to YouTube, the Gun University YouTube channel, and we'll continue it over there. Yeah, I agree with some of the other people saying it doesn't matter how much they tested the Beretta. Dot Gun, big fan, Ryan. Thanks, man. I wish I made more content. I wish I made more content too. I'm going to try and do it more. Multi-division master in USPSA and IDPA, and I like learning more about long. That's awesome, man. I would love to learn more about pistol from you because I am not master in USPSA and IDPA. I think I used to be in the local Cactus Match League in like limited or something like that, gun, but not anymore. I am rough on the pistol. So how about that? Maybe we need to figure out a way to trade. Michael says he bought his M17 back in 2024, hasn't had any issues with it yet. And all these BS about SIG now, it's only a paperweight. All the brands have some kind of issues. You're right. Mechanical things fail, and many, many brands have had issues. I'm not trying to say that SIG is horrible. I'm not trying to say that Glock is the best. I remember when there was a big issues with Glock KBs. Do you guys remember that? Late 90s, early 2000s. You know, Glocks were blowing up, the 40 Smith & Wesson ones especially, and there was a big issue about unsupported case heads. And yeah, 100%. I completely understand, and I agree. All mechanical things can fail. There are problems with all of them. I have an old Ford Bronco that I absolutely love. Ford's had problems. It's made bad cars before too. It doesn't mean that they're all bad and all cars have been good or bad. I don't know if that's a good example or not, but that's the best example I can give right now is, yeah, some people make bad things. My problem is I don't know if any of these stories are real or not. I'm just saying this timeline is really adding up against it. And there's hundreds of lawsuits or claims or things like that. It's adding up. Not saying any other gun, kind of like the example we talked about with the Beretta. It was tested more than the Beretta. That's awesome. I'm not saying one's better, one's worse. I'm saying I have an issue here. This is what's going on. Before I jump into the Army testing, I'll give you guys an example. The reason this became a big deal is yesterday, a big deal for me in my world here is I added a couple of videos yesterday showing my experience with the 320. And I was very careful in the videos to say, this does not say it's all 320s. This does not say 320s are just going to go off on their own in the holster. This doesn't say any of those things. It's just saying, I have a 320. This is what happens with mine. And in the first video, I was showing how I can fire it, hold the trigger to the rear, recharge the slide, and instead of releasing the trigger to get what I would normally expect as the trigger reset, I can touch the slide and get it to fire again. I don't like that. That doesn't mean that that gun will now go off in a holster on its own. That's not what I was saying. And then when I said that, you had so many people be like, oh, so you're saying those stories are fake? I don't know. I wasn't there. But I just said what I'm demonstrating doesn't mean that's the case. Then other people say, of course it means it's the case. It was amazing to see both sides of these comments. Oh my goodness. So I did 2 videos yesterday. One was that, and then the other one was just me playing with the slide and showing the gun would release the striker. Then Phil Strader, vice president at SIG, reaches out to me. I've known him since the Remington days. He texts me in a really cool way. He's like, hey man, I think I might know what's going on. Give me a call. That's about the coolest text I could get. That's way better than, "Hey, bleepity bleep, I'm so angry at you," blah, blah, because he probably was angry at me. But he reached out to help and try and diagnose and figure out the issue, and what he said was he thought that I was how I was putting it back together, and I think he was right. I think he was right. That doesn't mean that it's all the best now. That was the other thing. I did a third video today saying, "Hey guys, guess what? Phil reached out and he said this, and it looks like he was right, and it looks like I put the gun together wrong. And let me show you what happens here. But I still am suspicious about the design. I don't like it." And then today, the comments, I allowed them to frustrate me more than I should. One of the things that I allowed to frustrate me was I had multiple people on there saying, "Oh, he's just a Sig shill. He's bought and paid for by Sig. All credibility gone." Because like somehow I made the third video going, "Hey guys, guess what? I did something wrong." I'm gonna tell you guys now. That's called being accountable and being honest. I described the issue I had with my SIG. I demonstrated the issue I had with my SIG. I found out new information and realized that I had put it together incorrectly. So I have no problem coming out publicly and going, "Hey, guess what? I did something incorrectly. Look what the manual says. It says I should do X. I didn't do X, and it has this problem. Now, when I follow the manual exactly, the problem seems to go away. That's on me." That said, I also think it's a bad design that you can assemble it incorrectly. I think the design's too complicated. I don't trust it. I actually don't even think it's safe anymore. But even though I say all that and I write this scathing article about it, stuff like that, having everybody go on there and go, "Oh, he's a Sig shill." I'm like, guys, if you think me saying I don't trust it, I don't think it's safe, I've now switched from it. For the past 6 years, that's all I used as my training and competition pistol. I now don't use one anymore. I'm back to a Glock again. Me doing this timeline, me discovering or detailing the issues from the Army's testing and putting links to all these lawsuits, doing videos showing the problems. If you think all of that means I'm on SIG's payroll, I don't know what to say. And I would imagine SIG is furious with me, not happy with me. But that doesn't mean I can't be fair and say that there are millions of them out there that work great and that I have for 6 years have used it as my primary pistol and shot many, many thousands of rounds out of and really liked it. I enjoyed shooting it. I had a lot of fun with it. I even had some people saying, "Why would you switch to that from your Glock?" And yada yada. I'm like, and my answer is because I like how it shoots. I shoot well with it. I have some YouTube videos I did a couple years ago with Kyle Lamb when he and I are both shooting 320s. I was quick with the thing. It worked well for me. I really liked it. So no, I'm not for it or against the company or anything. I'm just saying this is what I found. So anyway, um, read some of the more comments and I'll get to the MHS testing. Pinto comes to mind. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're welcome for doing the deep dive. Sorry if it's boring for everyone else, but yeah. Do you think the voluntary upgrade of the lighter materials could be a problem? No, I think it solved the problem. I think it was good that they did it. My only criticism of the company and how they handled that is they should have done it the second they found out it was an issue with the Army. That's my problem. Someone says Thunder TMF says you shouldn't be able to assemble it incorrectly. I call BS. Yeah, we agree, man. You should not be able to assemble it incorrectly. We 100% agree. I think that is a bad part of the design completely. You put a slide on a Glock, you pull the slide back and let go, and it's together. I think it's better. Just watch the video. If I put it together wrong, it won't take a mag. It won't load the gun to fire. Exactly right. So Michael Dunn's right. In my video, I explained this all today in the video. I said, one of my criticisms also for the design is, wait a minute, I can put this thing together incorrectly and I have no way of knowing. And I just have this, in my opinion, dangerous condition firearm. And Phil actually told me, he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be able to put a magazine in." And so I tried it and he was right. In my testing, only a couple times I did it quote unquote incorrectly. And for those of you that are listening, I'll try to describe it. The Sig P320 has a takedown lever on the left side of the gun. And to take the gun apart, you remove the magazine, lock the slide to the rear, rotate the takedown lever down, release the slide release, and then the slide, barrel, and main recoil spring come off the top. And you're left with the lower half and the upper half. And when you want to put it back together, you align the slide rails and you pull the slide back on the pistol. And now here's the problem. I, just from used to doing this with SIGs, like even old SIGs, take the slide and I pull it all the way back on the pistol and hold it with my left hand. And with my right hand thumb, I just flip the takedown lever and then let the slide go and it's back on. Okay. Well, that apparently is the problem. If I do that, it is now in this, what I consider dangerous condition. and the trigger in one of my videos, I just barely touch it, it fires. Sometimes the striker doesn't even catch. Sometimes it fires just by pulling on the slide. It's all messed up in my opinion. And Phil's point was when I said, "How dangerous is that? That I don't know if this thing was in a safe condition or not." He said, "Well, you shouldn't be able to get a magazine in." Okay, um, got it. I can't touch a gun during the broadcast. YouTube will nuke it. Okay, well, I didn't know that. Maybe they'll nuke me now. I'll hide it down just in case I get away with it. Thanks for the heads up. So if if it's put together wrong, how am I supposed to know? So he says the magazine shouldn't fit in. Well, shouldn't. That means there's like 25 little different parts in here moving around, which I think is too many for a defensive pistol. But I take the magazine and I go to push it in, and it goes all the way in except for like the last quarter of an inch. It jams up. So Phil was right. When I put it into the incorrect orientation, the magazine wouldn't fit in. Well, if I pull the slide to the rear and lock it to the rear, now it's fully assembled, right? If I lock the slide to the rear, the magazine goes in just fine. So that fact that the magazine that wouldn't go in to alert me it's put together wrong goes away the second I just lock the slide to the rear, put the magazine in. The problem is, Sig would argue, well, yeah, you lock the slide to the rear, now the problem's gone. It is now back to the correct orientation. My problem is, how do I know? You have multiple things going on. The issue is caused by the sear gets lowered in the pistol that allows the slide to come off without pulling the trigger. Sig, likes this idea compared to the Glock to say you don't have to pull the trigger to disassemble, so it's safer. Well, by lowering that sear to allow the slide to come off, when I put it together, quote, the wrong way, the sear doesn't raise all the way back up. And also a whole nother part in another part of the gun sticks forward that gets in the way of the magazine. Well, when I lock the slide to the rear, apparently it removes some of the spring tension, that friction hold. It's all it is being a friction hold of the parts in the wrong orientation. It releases the friction, allows the parts to snap back into the right spot. Here's my problem. How do I know that the part that blocks the mag isn't the only one that slipped into the right spot and the sear didn't go back to the right spot? And now the magazine goes in. I'm like, oh, the problem's gone. I can't see the striker jump back up. I can't see both parts happen to jump back into their positions by spring tension. Also, on guns, I don't like having to rely on any parts that are just a light spring tension and a little bit of friction to slide back into place. Things get dirty, things get dry, things get jammed up, things get little burrs on them. I don't know. So, in one way, Sig's completely right and Phil's right. I did not follow the manual because the manual says when you put the slide on, lock the slide to the rear with the slide stop, then flip the takedown lever, then release it. Just using the slide stop completely changes what happens, which I just never did before. So in a way, they're right. I didn't follow what the manual says. My fault. I should have read the manual. I will take that responsibility on me. Again, commenters, that doesn't mean I'm a Sig shill because I can admit that I was wrong. Second, though, you shouldn't be able to do that. You should not have a pistol that could be assembled incorrectly. That's a problem to me. Especially, what if that thing, who knows what's going on in the military? What happens if that pistol now has to be sat without a magazine in there because the way MP's the guard gate or something like that, and it's been sitting for who knows how long. And someone needs to pick it up and load it quickly. And they take the magazine, they go to shove it in to load it, and they can't. And you can't get it done unless you lock the slide back. It's a stretch. I know I'm stretching now, but I'm saying, why are we making these weird features in there? Two, how do I know that when I lock the slide to the rear and I put the slide stop up and that little magazine blocker arm isn't the one thing that popped out of the way, but the sear didn't, or that little magazine blocker arm breaks and my magazine goes in fine, but my sear's not right. I don't like having two separate parts trying to tell me what to do. I don't think that's a good design. I appreciate they put that in there to try and stop that, but that's crazy to me that they had to even add that. Okay. I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. In my opinion, systems, whether they're guns or business systems for operations or whatever, they should alert you to the problem. You shouldn't have to look for it. So if the sear isn't the right orientation, I would want literally a little red flag. I said literally, I don't actually want one, but I'm saying imagine a little red flag sticking up going, problem. I don't want that to have to tell me that. And I have to go look in this file folder and look at this thing when I'm talking about business operations to find a problem. I want problems to make themselves readily apparent if there's a problem. I don't want to have to rely on problem with object A. Object B now has to tell me, because what happens if object A doesn't tell object B? And what happens if object B doesn't work? It's just a mess. That's too complicated. But second, why would you design object B to go, oh, well, we got this problem where the sear might not go all the way up if you don't use the slide stop? Because the takedown lever, if you move it and it lowers the sear, putting the takedown lever back should raise the sear. But we got this problem where if you don't raise the slide stop, which to me, on any pistol I can think of, you should be able to take the slide stop out. Like on a Glock, take the slide stop out and throw it in the trash can. The gun should run just fine without it. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, a major functional part of the gun. So if you don't raise the slide stop, then the sear doesn't go into the safe position. So we need to add something to the gun. So like go back to the drawing board and add a whole nother feature that does this whole other thing. We're gonna add this part now that sticks out, and this part has to be in the gun, and this is another part that could break, and this part's gonna stick out and make it harder to put a magazine in. Harder. I don't know how could I defeat it if I just shoved the magazine in there hard? Is a military guy going to break it and not know it broke? I just don't know. Anyway, um, it, it's a problem. I think it's too complicated. I don't trust the design anymore because it's too complicated. But that, again, that doesn't mean that just because I had that scenario happen to my gun, that these guns might just be going off in holsters. What I showed people was not it going off in a holster untouched. What I showed was putting my finger holding a trigger to the rear while I was manipulating the slide. That's very different than it being in a holster. So I'm kind of like dancing in the middle here. And I know for some people, they don't like the nuance, but that doesn't mean I hate Sig. And that doesn't mean I'm on Sig's payroll. That means I'm trying to call the shots like I see them. And I think this pistol has issues with it. And I'm going to get into those issues now. So the issues found during the Army testing, which I've never heard discussed before. Maybe I just was under a rock, but I haven't seen it before. Let's talk about this summary. Again, it's linked from the Gun University article. This summary is on the Office of Secretary of Defense's website right now. It is literally a real official document. And I summarized it for people if they don't want to have to read the whole thing, but it's linked right there. You should do your own research. The three main issues the Army found with the P320 were: number one, during drop testing, in which an empty primed cartridge was inserted, the striker struck the primer, causing a discharge. End quote. In other words, the Sig P320 variant would fire when dropped at a particular angle and height. Second point. I see a comment came in real quick. Someone says, as a gun manufacturer, would you ever say, yes, it can become unsafe if reassembled slightly wrong? Yeah, I guess I would. To be honest, yeah. To be fair, yeah. If you assembled it the wrong way, any gun could be as unsafe. Absolutely. If you did it. I think it should be obvious, though. I don't think it should be like this. I don't think it should be so complicated. And if I'm comparing to the Glock, if you guys want to take down a Glock, when you go to put it back together, you take the slide, you align it, you pull it on and let go. It's done. Seems a little more obvious. And if it doesn't go on right, the slide falls back off the gun. It's really obvious it's not put together wrong. Right. All right. Number two, both the XM17 and XM18 pistols, that's going to be the full size and the compact version, experienced double ejections where an unspent ball round was ejected along with the spent round. End quote. That was another problem. And the third issue, which I think is the really big one, because it wasn't fixed as far as I know, with ball ammunition, neither the XM17, the full-size P320 variant, nor the XM18, the compact-size P320 variant, passed the requirements for mean rounds between stoppages, the MRBS, okay? And the XM18 also didn't even meet the requirement for mean rounds between failures, MRBF. So the mean rounds between failures is the average number of rounds between a part actually breaking, part having to be replaced, breaking, the gun failed. Where mean rounds between stoppages is the average number of rounds it takes before the gun stops, which means it doesn't work. It jams, double feeds, something like that. But they also include a stoppage as the slide not locking back on the last round because it's not how it was designed. That's important for just a second. I'm going to, in the article, I dive a little bit more into the ECP, the engineering change proposal. I put, for the drop safety issue, the Army directed SIG to develop the ECP. They changed it. SIG modified the trigger mechanism and eliminated the problem. Subsequent testing validated the ECP worked. But again, they did not implement it in the civilian model. Let's get into the failure to meet requirements now. For the failure to meet the functional requirements, the MHS competition reliability requirements were the pistols to shoot 5,000 mean rounds between failure. That means 5,000 rounds on average were supposed to be fired from these pistols between parts actually breaking, like extractor breaking or something like that. Okay, so remember that again: 5,000 mean rounds between failure. and 2,000 rounds mean rounds between stoppages. So 2,000 rounds between jams, malfunctions, and 5,000 rounds between breakages. Okay? 5,000 for breakages, 2,000 for stoppages. Okay. These requirements applied both to the special purpose ammunition and the normal ball ammunition. And my understanding in life is that ball ammunition is the most easy, reliable, no questions asked ammo. If a gun doesn't work on ball ammunition, you got a problem. Okay. Just full metal jacket, standard ammo. So these pistols had to pass both the 5,000 round failure requirement and the 2,000 round stoppage requirement with both the special purpose and the ball ammunition. They passed with special purpose. That's not the issue. But the ball ammunition was a problem. Okay. With ball ammunition, the XM17 passed the 5,000 round failure requirement. It got to 7,000 rounds. Okay. But it did not make the 2,000 round stoppage requirement. Okay. So remember, the XM17 needed to go when you're testing them and you count how many rounds it fires until it malfunctions. You write it down and you do it again. And then that average needs to be 2,000 rounds or better. Okay. It needs to minimum. That's the requirement. 2,000 rounds between stoppages. Start thinking in your head where you think the XM17 made it to after through all the testing, the averages. It made it to 343. So the Army could only get it to go on average 343 times between jams. Or not jams, but stoppages. Okay. With ball ammunition, also the XM18, the other pistol, didn't make the 5,000 round failure requirement. It only made it to 3,900 rounds as average between parts breaking. That's a problem. So the XM17 made the failure requirement, but it did not meet the stoppage requirement. The XM18 didn't make the failure requirement or the stoppage requirement because on the stoppages, remember it needed 2,000 rounds between stoppages? And we know the XM17 did 343. How much do you think the XM18 did? 196. It could only make it 196 rounds between stoppages. That's a problem, guys. Both pistols from Sig, the XM17, the full size, the XM18, were supposed to make it 2,000 mean rounds, average rounds between stoppages, and they made it 343 and 196 respectively. That does not meet the bare minimum requirements for the test. So, why in the world was the test ended early and Sig declared the winner? The only thing I can think of is the Glock did way, way, way worse, but they don't have the Glock results. And I've asked people, and we don't know what the Glock results are, but I don't think it did. So the government summary explained that the majority of the stoppages were due to the slide not locking to the rear after the last round of the magazine fired. Okay, now let's be fair to the SIG. I get that. The way I hold the pistol, that happens too. Okay, the Army attributed this to a high grip when firing by the soldiers and determined that the issue could be resolved with training. Okay, training them to hold the gun wrong, in my opinion. But yeah, I get it. I get it there. So the failure of the slide to lock back accounted for the majority of the stoppages. So maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's not fair to say the gun wasn't running because the slide locked the rear. However, let's run the numbers. Okay. If we take out every single time that the slide locking issue was the problem, okay, if we ignored it completely and said, well, if most of it was from that, let's ignore that. Let's only focus on things like jams. Okay. Neither pistol would have met the 2,000 round requirement still. Okay, if we completely remove the slide lock issue, the results only for the XM17, they only go up to 708 mean rounds between stoppages. And for the XM17, or 950 rounds for the XM18. So again, I'm saying too many numbers. We were in the 100, 200, 300 range. So under 300 rounds when they needed 2,000 before. And they said, well, most of it was slide lock issues. Great. What about the other ones? Well, if we take the slide lock issues out, they only go up to 708 and 950. That means neither one of them even made half of the requirement. 1,000 rounds would have been the requirement. Neither one of them, even for reliability, could even make half. Guys, if I sound like I'm making a big deal out of this, I am. That was very, very shocking to me. Not only to see the guns not even make the reliability requirement, but also to end the test early and just award it to these guns. I don't know. That is very suspicious to me. Okay. Glock says the Army chose to go with the SIG pistol and end the testing early because of the cost. Yep, I think that's the case. The Glock was much more expensive. The Congressional Research Service put the unit cost for each MHS pistol, which is the whole kit in the pistol, okay, whatever comes in the box for it, at $180. Okay. At that price, it would cost the military $85 million for all the pistols they wanted. It does leave questions about the rest of the 580 million from the contract. So 580 million was planned, and Sig said, "We'll do it for 85 instead of 580." And so they got the contract. And Glock came in quite a bit higher. I've heard some people say 100 million higher. So if it's true, I don't know. If it's true that the Army stopped the testing early and picked the guns that can't even meet half of the bare minimum requirement for reliability, and they knew fired when they dropped, and they were double ejecting rounds, and stuff like this. They didn't even finish the testing and just said, "That's it, Sig wins," because the cost. Well, then I think it's safe to say I understand what people are talking about when they say the Army just went with a cheap gun. If they did that, I don't know. All right, back to some of the comments. Have I tried this test with any of my older 320s? Yes, and I cannot get it to happen. This is the only 320 I have that does this. Okay, so nothing on my other 320s does it. And when Phil mentioned to me that he's only had this happen once on one of his, like it's not a thing all the time. Michael says he has an M17 that he bought in 2024. He did the test and the sear went off every time. Yikes. Press slide catch lever to release slide without a loaded magazine is not recommended practice. Yeah, I agree. Unnecessary parts wear, but that's what they say. Yeah, way too many problems. A manual is not a hard requirement that has to be read and followed unless there's a law requiring it, like airliners. Yeah, so my problem with the manual too, that's a good point, Hank, is I should have read the manual, I guess. I didn't follow the manual. My fault. However, when I highlighted it in the video, I showed that it was just part of a paragraph. It was like, okay, when you put it back together, align the slide, pull it to the rear, engage the slide stop. Then the next step, rotate takedown lever. It wasn't like in bold, warning, you must use the slide stop lever. A failure to do so will create an unsafe condition. Or if you cannot insert the magazine in your pistol, here's why. It got assembled incorrectly and it's not safe in this condition. They didn't do any of that. It just said use the slide stop lever. So technically it said use the slide stop lever, and I didn't do that. But I didn't see that as a step like you had to do it. It wasn't even its own step. It was just, next to another step. And I equated this to some of the people in the comments today on, okay, you bought a new car, and in the manual, it happens to say that when you fill the gas tank, you need to lift the driver's side windshield wiper when you're filling the gas tank. And if you don't do that, then the steering wheel is going to be locked and you can't drive. Unless you put the emergency brake on, then the steering wheel unlocks and it should solve the problem, but you don't know because you can't see inside the engine. Wait, what? Why in the world, when I'm filling my gas, should I be going over here and doing that? I should just be able to fill the gas. And you could say, well, Ryan, the manual clearly said you're supposed to lift the driver's side windshield wiper. And my response would be, you're right. I did not fill the gas tank according to what the manufacturer said in the manual. That is my fault for not following the instructions. That said, who in the heck is a gun person for life reads the owner's manual on how to use a semi-automatic striker-fired pistol? Not me. I didn't read the manual because why would I read the manual? I can almost guarantee that none of you read the manual for your car on how to fill the gas tank. I might look at the manual for look at torque settings for something. I might do that. I might look at the manual for failure points or where it recommends to oil or something like that. Just like you look at your car's manual for the type and quantity of the oil it takes, or the service, schedule, or the torque for the lug nuts. But you're not going to look at the owner's manual, I really doubt, for how to fill the gas tank. That just seems like a normal thing to do. Even though every car might be different and the lever might be located here and this one might have a flap, it's kind of one of those things you can kind of see and figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, then I'll do it. But you shouldn't allow me to fill it the wrong way, fill the gas the wrong way. And then now something else in the car shouldn't work to let me know there's a problem. Because what if happens the steering wheel lock doesn't engage and it didn't alert me? That's my example of the magazine lever that stops the magazine. It just seems unnecessarily complicated to me. I don't get it. You tried performing. Someone else says they tried performing tests from the videos, but the SIG didn't go off. Awesome. That's really good. Again, this is the only one for me, and from what I'm hearing from other people, it's not every single one that does this. And it should block the magazine. But let's bring up that should example I just said. It should. Well, you know what else should happen? The gun should go together the right way. It should hold the striker and not let it slide over. So here's a great example. The vast majority, it seems like, of 320s do not share the problem that I have and I demonstrated. Okay, because they shouldn't do that. It should hold the striker. But in my case, for whatever anomaly, maybe a part's broken, a part's worn, it's out of spec, it does happen. So that's the problem I have with, oh, don't worry if it gets assembled correctly. It should prevent the magazine from being inserted. Well, what happens if 1 out of a million, because there's millions of these things out there, if 1 out of a million has this problem, well, how do we know that 1 out of a million isn't going to block the magazine like it's supposed to? I don't know. Anyway, what did HK test their USBs to? I don't know, 20,000 rounds, maybe. I hesitate now to go the other way. Here's the lawyer and me. We're talking both sides, like I've been doing this whole time. Just because they tested to a lot of rounds doesn't mean it's necessarily good either. I've seen guns that have been tested to a lot of rounds that were junk guns. My point is, if you're going to have a test, if you're going to have a competition for who can have the best pistol, and all these manufacturers go to compete, you go to compete in anything. You go to compete in a race, you do jujitsu, and you go to compete in a tournament, you go to compete in a Lego building contest, whatever you go to compete in. If there's a set of rules and you find out that they ended the judging early and and the winner didn't even meet the basic requirements for the rules, you'd be upset. That doesn't mean that in your sandcastle building contest that a building is tested to more poundage than your sandcastle. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the rules said they're going to test to this, and I don't know what Glock's results were. If anyone can find Glock's results, send them to me. But considering the Army didn't say that the Glocks were worse, or that we picked it because of the reliability, and because I think the Government Accountability Office's own report and the results of Glock's protest say nothing about that. Instead, it says it's up to the Army. They want to pick what they want, and they can say what they want. So anyway, off topic. When's Long Range Handbook 2 coming out? By next SHOT Show for sure. I've already signed up with booths at SHOT Show that I'm going to be signing the second Long Range Shooting Handbook. So I've painted myself into a corner, so it's got to be done by then. I'm making good progress on it. One of my big problems is I get into an article or a chapter and I start writing it, and then I get too into the weeds, and I try not to get into the weeds, and I'm trying to keep things simple, but it's hard to keep advanced topics simple. So I keep doing that, doubting all over myself. But if you're going to be at SHOT Show next year, I will be at a couple booths. I'm already signed up now that they're got time set aside announcing for me to sign the second long range shooting book. So let's see. Army contract seems super suspect. I think so too. Heard the pistol contract was connected to the rifle contract. I didn't know that. Yeah. All right. I don't think I rambled, but I talked enough about it. Maybe there's some issues here. We have a gun that has a history of controversy. Okay. The Army identified that it fired when it was dropped at a certain angle. SIG's response was, so what? Other guns can fire too. That's not exactly part of the industry tests. Army said, fix it, or you're not going to go forward in the competition. So if SIG said, okay, we'll fix it, here's the fix. They came out, they designed and changed and made a fix. They did not then implement that fix into the civilian gun until it came to a head. I don't know if it coming to a head caused it or not. I'm just saying, stating in fact and time. It came to a head, became a big deal. Then SIG said, okay, fine. We came up with a fix. Well, yeah, that's because they already had the fix. If you want it, it's still fine and safe, but if you want yours fixed, send it and we'll fix it for free. Great. So many people send theirs in and fix it for free. I have to assume many people don't also. So that's one issue, is the drop safety issue. The second issue I have is the reliability issue. Upon finding this document from the Army, it did not meet the basic requirements for reliability for the test. Matter of fact, it had what I consider pretty low numbers for the average rounds between stoppages. The unofficial numbers I heard from Glock don't matter because they're unofficial. Someone could have made them up. But based on me seeing nothing about that in the protests or in the government's findings or anything like that, I don't think the Glock had the problem, or else I think they would have listed that, because they came back for the protest for Glock and said, well, it's the Army's discretion. If they want to buy a cheaper gun, they can buy a cheaper gun. That's what they can do. They can then the test early and just buy it. The best results would have been, or response would have been, yours didn't meet the standard either, but that was nothing in there. So I think that's what's going on there. Anyway, there's that issue. And then now there's the uncommanded discharge issue, which might not even be real, right? Because what I showed yesterday was, hey, the striker's going forward. I found out that I didn't assemble it per the manual. And had I assembled it per the manual, I probably wouldn't have had that problem, which means maybe it's not an issue. And the magazine should not have been able to go in the gun. I guess I could have opened up the slide and dropped a round in there, and now I got a problem. I don't have to use a magazine to feed the gun, right? So I guess there's the argument there. That could be it. My argument is not that aha, this problem I had therefore means this is an issue with the gun. My argument is, aha, I've got this problem with the gun. Now, upon realizing how complicated in these parts and the striker can go over, and I can't tell if it's not, I don't trust it anymore, and it makes me suspicious of it. That's where I'm at. Um, yeah, and I've heard other unofficial, which I can't even put out there on the writing because I can't prove it, but people finding issues with like the striker block, and I've heard some of these have even been sent to people that should know or are involved in this, and it's kind of been ignored. I'd love to get some more proof. If I can get proof, I'll put that up in the article and I'll link to it. So, is the Sig 320 a good, safe gun? There are people that I think are very knowledgeable at firearms that would say yes, that would say that it is completely safe and that it cannot fire unless the trigger's pulled, and everything about it is fine. There are other people that say it's a grenade just waiting to go off. You just look at it crooked and it's going to go off. I think the truth might be somewhere in the middle. I think that even if it doesn't have the uncommanded discharge issue, which I think it might possibly, because I have suspicious behavior with a gun that shouldn't do things that it's doing, whether I put it together right or wrong. So that's kind of weird. Even if it doesn't have that, fine, take that off the table. It does have a reliability problem according to the Army's own tests. Okay. And if you don't want to look at that, fine, take that off the table. It did have a drop safety problem that the Army identified and that SIG had to put out a fix for to get that issue to stop from happening. Taken all together and then taken with all 100 plus of these claims, let's say half are bogus. Fine, 50 claims. Let's say half of those or more are the user's fault. Fine, 25 claims. It may not be true. It may be fine. However, even though I liked this gun and used this gun for the past 6 years as my main gun for everything, for training and competition, all that kind of stuff, because I really liked shooting with it, I am now telling you that my personal choice is I will not have these things loaded in the house. I will not use them anymore at all. And the only hesitation I have from selling them is I think it's unsafe enough that I don't want to sell it to somebody. So I've had people talk about the gun they use in the videos going, if you don't want it, I'll take it. Okay. But what happens if I sell that and somebody gets hurt? Maybe I'm making too much about it. Maybe I'm too worried. I don't know. Uh, you guys let me know if you think I'm crazy here. So I'll upload the podcast here. It's been an hour of me talking about the Sig P230, 320, not the 230, the 320. That's how delirious I'm getting about this. I will open it up to any more comments if you guys want to go. I'm going to end the podcast here. So the podcast will end here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll try to get more done. Let's see if you believe me and actually do it. And I'm going to stay on for some more comments if you guys want to do it on the YouTube here. Understanding is 320 doesn't have plunger blocking. Yeah, it does. No, it does not have a plunger, Dunk. He says, my understanding is the 320 doesn't have a plunger blocking the striker, which is common with the Glock, M&P, Walther, HK. Is that correct? Yes, it's correct. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a striker safety. So those plungers are in the slide, and those plungers are there so that if I just took the bare slide in my hands and I pulled the striker back like a pinball launcher and then let it go, it should not come out of the slide face. It should not hit a primer cell because that plunger should stop it. And that plunger is in a different location on the slide. And the trigger bar usually has a little arm that sticks up. So as I pull the trigger back, that trigger bar pushes the plunger up and out of the way so that when the striker releases, it's allowed to go through. Okay. It's a striker safety. Okay. Or like a firing pin safety on other guns. So no, the 320 doesn't have a plunger, but it still has a striker safety. Towards the back of the striker, there is a angled piece of metal. It pivots down and it has a spring kind of like in the shape of an a spring that holds that piece, and that piece sticks down, the striker is stuck and it won't go forward. That piece has to be pushed up in order for the striker to go through. So it still has a striker safety, but it's not a plunger. The problem is I've heard some complaints. I don't know how real they are, but I've heard some complaints of people saying the spring can slip off that because it's a little thin piece of metal, really thin, like looks like a little stamped piece of metal. The spring can easily slip off of that. Maybe easily is the wrong word. The spring can slip off of that and therefore render the striker safety disabled. Also, that piece of metal that slides up and down, because it's a longer piece of metal and thin, can be maybe more susceptible to dirt or grime or something getting it stuck in the up position versus a plunger that can have a stronger spring behind it. A little more sealed. I don't know, but I've heard there could be issues there. Cuban Cowboy just says, I'm just logging on. Did you discuss assembling the gun wrong? Yes, 100%. Deeply discussed it. So please go back and check it out and see if I did that fair. Um, I did not. I don't know if I assembled it wrong. I did not assemble it according to the manual. And if the manual says to do it a certain way, I should probably do it that way. However, I gave the example of who looks at that manual and how to assemble it, and we weren't told this is like a safety issue and all the mess there. So go ahead and go back and listen to it, guys. I appreciate you. Some of the people in the comments, I don't appreciate you. You guys have need to go to the range and shoot more. The amount I need to stop reading comments on YouTube is what I need to do. I I don't even want to get into it again. You guys have a great night. I appreciate your guys' support. I would love to hear your comments. Go make your comments in the article about whether you think it's safe or not, whether you still trust it, um, and whether you got anything from this. Because I was so weasel wordy, I'm not willing to say it's 100% not good or it is 100% good. I'm just saying not for me anymore. All right, you guys have a good night.